Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Good day. This is Dr. James Weldon of Yogadhi, speaking from Heavenly Mountain, our community in Boon, North Carolina. In our continuing discussions on the secret journey to the enlightened mind, sharing the life story of some guy by the name of Yogadhi in a series on living the enlightened life to help people understand some of the deeper aspects of spirituality and personal growth, at least from my own personal experience, some of the things that I've been through. And this chapter is entitled, Who is Asleep and Who is Awake? I want to give you two different perspectives here. Obviously, there's a huge adventure going on in life. Obviously, this adventure does not only contain us, the people on this planet, solar system, going about the outer rim of a spiral galaxy in a huge universe, who, according to the experts, is maybe some 18.5 billion years old. Nobody really knows their states of consciousness. Compared to our state of consciousness, that this would be asleep. There's waking, there's dreaming, there's sleeping. There's another state of consciousness in the transitional state between waking, dreaming, and sleeping. That's called Turiya, or transcendental consciousness. And sometimes, at least in my experience, intuitive insights can come in that arena. Things which we would not normally be able to know can be known. And I begin chapter 13 on who's asleep, who's awake. It's a question you need to think about with a point. So who is asleep and who is awake? What does it matter? When the divine is in all of us, does it matter who knows and who does not? When the self, the big self, is all the same, yes, obviously there's pain, there's death. It's real. And yet, in a certain sense, it doesn't exist. It's kind of a joke from one point of view, that the divine is so great, at least showing me, from my point of view, this impossible truth. I see that the love that we are is dancing after itself, seeking itself forever. And as I was looking over this chapter, I was thinking, well, maybe I should rewrite this a little bit different. I spent a lot of time thinking about these topics. And in my life, I spent a lot of trying to overcome sleep and failed. In other words, not to sleep too much, not to sleep too little. I thought that perhaps in a higher state, I would only sleep a few hours. And somehow I believed that sleeping was a waste of time. You know, you think of all the time in your life. How much time do you spend, driving the car, at least in the United States? How much time do you spend sleeping? How much time do you spend eating? So many years in the toilet, watching TV. How much of that time is really lived in tremendous joy? Not as much as we would like. And the whole purpose of the work is to try to bring much more of that joy out. So one morning in this phase, I'm now living in Estes Park, Colorado, with a home up on the edge of the mountains. I've taken a break from running my naturopathic business. I really would encourage you to go back and listen to some of these earlier chapters, possible from the beginning, so it'll give you a bigger perspective on what I'm talking about. So I've just gone through a period of some very powerful energies awakening in my body. I call it Shakti, or the Kundalini. One morning, I wake, and I realized all of a sudden, as I got up that morning, that my consciousness was no longer disappearing into unconsciousness at night. That my body was sleeping, but somehow I was still there. And by the way, this started out as a very subtle experience, and gradually over the years, of course, it's gotten much, much stronger. And I'm finding myself watching dreams come and go and subside in the night. They're like pearls on a long string. And the string that drives these experiences together is a consistent witnessing self. It's a pure stream of what I would call self-consciousness that didn't seem to be changing. So I'd get up in the morning and go about my activity, and the succession of my activity during the day and sleeping were more like beads on a string instead of everything totally disappearing into blackness. And sometimes my mind is more active during these nighttime episodes, and sometimes its concentration wavers, but the same string of unbroken consciousness is now continued. And I'm seeing now that these changes are in the mind. There's a dimension of my self-consciousness, capital self-consciousness, that is something other than the mind. I awaken, then this energy that I was talking about in the last step begins to become stronger. And that I can be completely tired from work and I can ache from head to foot. This time, by the way, I was helping people in a counseling business that were going through financial difficulties. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that energy would come up and all the tiredness would be completely gone. My body was like a battery that had been run down from use, and then all of a sudden, boing, up it would come, like plugging into a socket into the wall. And a surge of life, like electricity, is now beginning to pour through these subtler channels. They are talked about in the Indian tradition as nadis, not the same as nerve channels, but life force channels. But often as these energies would flow through the body, I would have to stop the movement because it just was too intense for me. I couldn't take it. This is something really new and very important in my step of evolution. And I do believe there are many people that are coming into higher states of consciousness now in the world. And those of you that have this from time to time, it's not a requirement. For me, this was a place in my life beyond the opening of the energy centers or the chakras in the body. They'll know what I mean when it happens. And that new manifestation of energy would mostly rush across my face with such intensity, I'm just paralyzed in that experience. I'd reach up with my hand and rub those points kind of to make it go away, because it would be like having a super itch, but it's not I can't describe it. But imagine you're about to sneeze or something, and that you can't quite have the sneeze, but it's coming up and up and up. Actually, that's one of the same channels. We do have these channels that open in our body. The most common one that people experience is a channel between the base of the spine and the sex organs. This is actually, that experience is a nadi, but there are many, many of them all throughout the body that gradually will open up. And it seems so tender at that time that I could just touch it and it would begin to fade away. But I really don't want it to go away. I just want a little bit of a relief. My dear wife, Lynn, Rama, comes in and I ask her, okay, kiss this point, kiss this point. It seems as though maybe that moment of love would ease the intensity a little bit. Loving touch of my wife would somehow direct it when I couldn't. And sometimes I almost feel if it was a disability. You know, from the day I began to meditate, I'd experienced some concentration of these energies, chakras in the body. At first, it was just a sensation in my forehead, like a touching sensation, and then my heart, and gradually those sensations would become experience of blissfulness. And then that awareness, it becomes comparatively infinitely intense. Obviously, literally, it's not infinitely intense, but it's intense and something that I couldn't really conceive of beforehand. Before that time, those centers had become obvious in the body in 7 centers, not all the time, but they'd rise and fall, and just sometimes, you know, blazing with great intention. Sometimes they'd be very quiet. This experience of points on my face is something new. What's important is I'm trying to, as far as I know, the first time, show the progression of the growth of consciousness in a way that, as far as I know, nobody even the yogis that I've seen in India has ever explained it this way. I'm laying it all out. Even though these are intense times, there are going to be some very interesting, distressing times coming down the road, believe me, for me. So don't worry, it's not all flowers and bliss. There are some real challenges that are coming. But these could occur really anywhere on my body, but especially on my face. It's as if I'm paralyzed for a moment, stuck in that experience. One analogy is I feel sometimes like I'm a disabled person with a trick knee. So my knee, by the way, from old football, sometimes does this, might go out of joint a little bit, and you can tell. And this is only an analogy, but imagine you were walking down the street and all of a sudden your knee gives out. And in surprise, you would not be able to have support there, and you'd maybe fall on the ground and grab your leg, absorbed in that intense pain. Or imagine that you stepped on a nail. It's not like a nail, but it's a point of intensity. And you're just completely absorbed in that sensation. In the case of a trick knee, maybe some excruciating knee. In my case, I twist my knee to one side, and this little piece of cartilage, by the way, that's healed gets back into place. This is healed over the years, but at that time I was going through that. And immediately you can stand up again, you head on down the room. So this is kind of what the energy was doing to me. But surely this experience shows that there are many more things to come. And in the literature, it says that there are 72,000, it's a lot, of subtle pathways for this energy to flow through the body. And I'm experiencing energy flowing through some of these, and our experience of sex opening for a few minutes on the same nadi. Imagine that, and the whole world is obsessed by that experience. From many years after this began, that this continues to grow and grow until this kind of fulfillment is flowing through all of those pathways. Such possibilities exist for life. Now, those of you who have done some of the practices, these kriyas, these breathing techniques, can understand, because that elicits something like this. So at this point in my life, I'm studying under the Siddha Yoga tradition, and the teacher, I'm learning from is the successor of Swami Muktananda. In the last chapter, I basically was told, okay, now go study here. And I'm back in New York, and it's a special holiday. It's a special full moon in July called the Purnima Day, Guru Purnima Day, at that retreat center. And it's a day for celebrating the existing of a true teacher. They're called in the Indian traditions Sadguru, true teacher. It's really not a person in the sense that we think of an individual, but a person can have that position really if they have that high consciousness, a certain high consciousness. And it's the day where we remember the teacher and a lineage of them. Particular holiday, I've been practicing this meditation about 20 years now, in the time in this book. It's celebrated to remember the tradition of enlightenment. And this entire spiritual community, it's kind of like Christmas, I guess you could say, but Christmas for celebrating that there is somebody that is attaining these states that can help us gain them. So there's a big vegetarian feast, and extra time being spent for spiritual practices. They were doing these practices of chanting the Sanskrit sounds or mantras 24 hours a day. It's been going on 24 hours a day. That is a developed taste, but this is also another methodology of meditation. Induces a very serene state when it's done over time. So we're in a huge hall at this time with 17,000 people. And the spiritual teacher, her name is Guru Mai, Muktananda's successor, he's speaking. And as she speaks, I look through her as if I was peering through a window. And I feel a great vast space beyond that. And she's talking about a plane of grace filled with white light, saying that all of us, though we know it or not, dwell in there in a divine body, shimmering like a blue pearl. And she described this place as an ocean of love. And in this, I feel restless while this is going on. And something tickles my mind because her every word is so familiar, so true somehow. And at this point, I realized that she's talking about something like I received so many years ago, 17 years ago in this story, where I received a spiritual gift called Ritam, Bhara, Pragya. And I'd never heard of another person talk about that, except very briefly in passing. Maharishi mentioned it long ago. So I'm overwhelmed by this. And the tears are just running down my face because I'm astonished, because I know the truth of her words. I know there is a level of life where all the divine love of God is really fully manifest. And I know, at least from the experiences that I've had, that that level of creation, I believe all the universe arises and falls from that space. And all the forces and powers of nature also arise from that space. The universe flows there like from an endless sea.
We could wish to see something here, and then just by power of thought, this thing will flash in its reality. That state of intellect is called Ritam, Bhara. Ritam means Satyam. Satyam means truth. Bhara, Bharti iti, which accepts only the truth. That state of intellect which only accepts the truth, or which only reflects the truth. In that state, only the truth is reflected. That Ritam, Bhara, Pragya is that state of intellect which conceives or perceives things as they are. In that state of celestial experience, if Krishna comes, then he is real Krishna. If Shiva comes, he is real Shiva. If Divine Mother comes, she is real Divine Mother. There is no mental hallucination. There is no other than the real form in that perception. Until that thing has happened, we don't want to desire to see anything. Much before that state is gained, you could desire and something could flash, but there won't be the guarantee for truth of it. Something may be right, something may be wrong. Therefore, we don't think to see anything until the celestial vision becomes clear. And once that is clear, anything could be seen in that state. You desire something and it's there in its true color. There won't be any mistake in that.
And at least from my experience, all of us living whatever levels of life really exist there as drops or bubbles of this divine consciousness. That this place that I experienced once so long ago is ultimately my true home. And suddenly in the middle of this hall with all these thousands of people, I suddenly feel desperately that I have to somehow attain that again. An overwhelming longing rises in to go back there. And after 17 years, I realized that this is the attainment. And knowing that there is a fine level of creation, it's possible to experience. In my case, this was the highest truth. It was possible to return there, experience that, maybe even stabilize that as a constant experience. The story of the enlightened mind that I've come to share, that there really is a place like this, and on this place we really are free and can know and be and live in a moral state in that space. And remember, I'm in a big lecture hall with thousands of people. And as the lecture continues, I lose my consciousness of the room, and deeper within I'm diving, searching. An hour passes as I look to see if I can feel or sense this. But although my meditation is full of tremendous happiness, bliss, and light, I can't reach it. And a sense of desperation creeps into my mind. A shaking fear inhabits every fiber of my mind as I wonder, what if I can't reach it again? I know that this space is everywhere, yet at that time in my life, it seemed to be so far away. And I see a level of darkness that's holding me back. And as I'm reaching for that, I'm talking about reaching forward in consciousness, some veil, I can't penetrate it. I don't understand. I'm perplexed because my experience of my inner self seemed to be clear. And as the program ends, I leave the hall defeated. And I'm wandering about the sculptured grounds of this retreat center ashram up in New York, feeling completely lost, stupefied by what I've seen. And wherever I walk, I'm seeing a dark cloud felt in my meditation now, stopping me. Now, this is a conversation that is going on within me. And I'm thinking, what is the use of 20 years of meditation, prayer, hard work, service, if such insight cannot open that door? For a moment, everything was so clear. Now it seems as though all of these accomplishments were like ashes. On a beautiful night in the full moon, where the beauty is everywhere and the gardens are there, but I can't see it. All that fills my mind is a torture. In a sense, nothing else seems to be matter. My small mind has the form of a haze. And everywhere I'm looking, I see that confusion before me. So this ego is saying, I want to find God. I want to know the self. I'm a yogi. I. See, there's two there. And it's driving me crazy. I look at this limited vision of I, and I wonder, what is it? What am I? I'm nothing, nobody. Yet I think I'm so important. Oh, wow, I have such experience. Who will care, really, if I ever lived at all? In a few years, no matter what we do, we're gone. Nothing, created from nothing. Worse, this body that I crave is just a sack of bones, dust, heading for the grave. As I look at this confusion, I experience it in again, and I realize that overcoming it, at least at this point, appeared to be an impossible task. How can I overcome something that doesn't really exist? This I-ness, this self, small, maybe known as confusion, maybe Maya, maybe it's the deepest illusion of the divine. Listen carefully. This deepest ignorance, I had come to the conclusion I couldn't accomplish and overcome by myself. And that ultimately the story is that there's a power of grace in life that can do it, but we can't do it alone. And suddenly I felt the full impact of what I need to do to defeat my own confusion, my own ignorance. At that time, I didn't feel that I had the ability to overcome it. It looked like an impossible task. I mean, how does the screw in the screw? How does the mind fix itself? Can it? Something beyond that is required. And I never saw it before so clearly at that time, that by oneself, this is nearly an impossible task. And I'm looking at the task before me, and I'm feeling tremendous despair. Now I understood, at least at that moment, why some people, well-meaning and very sincere people, commit suicide. Because of that kind of desperation. And over the last few days, I'm feeling a part of me almost out of control. And I realize that's what it is. I had touched a kind of craziness, honestly. The darkness in this world without the light, the divine light of godliness, is too much for me in this moment. And even though I was experiencing tremendous happiness on and off, for me, it was not enough. It was like God was playing some kind of hide and seek game. Seeing for a moment, not seeing for a moment. Tremendous clarity, no clariness. And at that moment in my life, it was more than I could stand. And for a while, I'm wandering about, kind of looking for an answer in that hopelessness. And I'm hoping that I can find some path, some way that at this point in my life, I couldn't reach it. An intellectual answer to the darkness around me provide no relief. Tremendous longing that I've had, a madness almost, is coming up again. And while I'm walking along the path, there are statues of the world's teachers there. Christ is there as an example of divine love. Buddha is there demonstrating compassion in the silence of the void. Krishna is dancing playfully, telling the story of self-realization in the middle of a war. Shiva, with a trident, is posing as the destroyer of ignorance. All these forms are forms of a formless truth, and they're examples of the reality of God's power of grace. But at this time, I was not feeling any grace. And as I walk by these features, I'm grateful for the blessings. So much joy, so much light, so much greatness has come into my life. Why should I be complaining? I had tasted enough joy for 100 lives, yet the fulfillment that I experienced at that time, it wasn't enough. Why was I left searching for more? This is crazy, I'm thinking. Nothing seems to satisfy my thirst for more spiritual experiences. So many had come, but they came and they went. And as my experience of divinity becomes higher and higher in waves, it's often that the love, the loss of that for these moments is devastating me. And I'm wondering how much longer I can go on. So an hour is passing, kind of stumbling, and then before me is a statue. I don't know if you've seen this image before. I'm sure you have, maybe of Shiva. He's sitting commonly, bathed in blue light, holding a trident, symbolic of destroying our ignorance. And before this statue, there is a small fire, and people have written prayers on slivers of wood and put them in the fire in the fire. And so one moment I'm looking at this, my feeling of this image, it seems so alive. And the next moment, it's nothing but paint and plaster. And form is feeling full of life and promise, then dead. Just like turning off the lights. And that figurine before me resembles my awareness, in which I'm seeing the truth one moment, and the next moment I cannot. And I can't contain myself anymore. And the torrent of longing for the divine I feel is so intense, I feel like I will explode. And I'm crying out to be released. And I gaze into the blackness that I'm seeing, thinking, and I can't repeat it because quite the way that I did then, but literally I was screaming out to the space, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? It was a lot louder then. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs to this image. I'm daring the divine to show me. In a rage, I'm shaking my fist. Show me. And then I'm going, what good am I? Really, what good are we without that? What do I have to give to others without you? Worthless without that. Words and visions mean nothing. And my entire life passes before my inner eye. And I realize that this existence is just really a ripple in time. And again, I shout, this stupid mind cannot find the way without you. I'm lost without the grace. I try again. It's not enough. It will never be enough. These lips cannot speak the truth if you don't take them. This body cannot do the work if you don't fill it with your power. I'm trying to reach your home, but I can't find it. What must I do? Show me. And I fall on the ground. A little dramatic at that time, but I was feeling a little hopeless. And my mind rambles on, and again I look up at the statue. 1 minute it's filled with lies, next moment it's just carved stone. The contrast, the utter paradox of saying the truth, and at the same time it's still hidden, falls on my mind. Crushing. I'm stunned and really beaten by the prospect of going alone without guidance. A sudden impulse suddenly seized me to just run off, into the darkness. I did that a couple of times in my life, seeking something that I can't comprehend. And from time to time, there's grace that's come into my life. It came here. What it was, I know probably now, but this time it's saying, not yet, not yet. I will come, not yet. Wait. Something was whispering at the edge of my mind. At this point, my desperation had reached its peak, and then it passed. My dear friends, we have no idea, how this power of darkness is that hides us from the goal of our illuminated self. This night I saw that darkness, which was holding me back. I see the power of what I would call Maya or confusion, in a certain sense, that owns this whole world. I'm dazed. But I know now, at this moment, going over that peak, that whatever that is can't break me. And I set myself again that nothing can shake me from following this path. I had reached the depths of darkness on that night, but I decided, okay, let's take a breather here. let's return to rationality. And I lift myself from the ground. I look up at that form, and I look in that face, and there seems to be a special smile there just for me. And I wander back to the meditation hall, and I consider what I should do next. At least I could maybe go back and sleep, and forget this lingering despair. But I could also go into the main hall and sing, spend some time with the sound, and sing my love for the divine throughout the night. I realize we all make such decisions in a small way, big, all the time. Every day we get up and make a choice to feed our separation from the divine or follow a higher path. To live an unconscious life, drifting from event to event, is to turn away from the divine. The way that the world lives seems so easy, but in truth, it's the most painful life we can live. I saw that night that I understood that our life is truly a battle, and that we are all warriors on the field of life. Our lives are quiet battles, that only that life that sees and hears all, the divine God sees and hears. The lines are drawn on that battlefield in our life, as surely in the ancient story of Krishna teaching Arjuna, story of the Bhagavad Gita. And every day we make those choices. Am I going to do the things that culture my inner consciousness, practices that I've learned, fortunately, if I have? And that night I also faced a choice. Will I lose myself in sleep, or I'll lose myself in love? In a sense, my kingdom of light had been stolen from me by my own smallness. Will I stand up and fight, or will I give up? Really the choice is simple. There really is no other choice. I have no enmity for this darkness then that I was experiencing, but I'll choose a different path. And I'll spend this night singing, opening myself again to that love again and again. There is no other way to freedom than to give yourself to the universe consistently in love. And turning away, I watch my feet walk back to the main hall. I'm tired. It's early in the morning. But what does fatigue of the body mean? It means nothing. In a few moments, again, it's gone. And it was time to experience the wonder of song. And I do encourage you to listen to some of the earlier episodes, if possible, from the beginning, because we're getting pretty deep into this stuff now. And it's important that you understand that what I'm talking about here was a progression of over 20 years now. And a lot of things happened on the way. So in the next segment, we're going to talk about the value of song. Song and sound is very, very powerful. Join me in that next segment on the power of song, music, and voice to raise consciousness. I'll talk to you shortly. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us in our YouTube channel, books, podcast episodes on living the enlightened life, and autobiography with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon.